Good morning, hello there, thank you for joining me. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, witam, witam. Why am I saying witam? Well, that's because it means hello in Polish. Why am I saying hello in Polish? Because today we're looking at a 2019 Mayones Duvell Elite custom shop. Ricky, run that montage. What we're going to be doing to it. So, the usual setup process. However, we are going to be changing some parts. So we're removing these Bare Knuckle Ragnarok pickups. We're replacing with Bare Knuckle Silo pickups with the gold covers on. One of those is very nice, one of the Reverb custom ones, very sweet. We're also changing out the Hipshot bridge for a gold one. We're replacing these knobs for gold knobs. We're replacing the machine heads for gold machine heads. So yes, you guessed it, we're going gold vibes on this guitar. So other than that, we're going to be doing the usual setup process, polishing some frets, cleaning the nuts, doing all that stuff. Let's jump into the initial inspection. These forms that I'm filling out right here are available to download from my website, drguitars.co.uk. If you fancy setting up a guitar yourself, you can download one of these completely for free, no strings attached, and you can work on your own guitars, and hopefully it helps you out and it's something useful for you. But you know, if you don't want to, don't. So what we're going to be doing, initial inspection, strings wise, we're tuning this to drop A sharp. So A sharp, F, A sharp, D sharp, C, G. On the strings, we're going to be using D'Addario. Honestly, I'm not sponsored by these, it's just, you know, keep using them all the time. D'Addario EXL148, so this is the 60 to 12 pack. There it is. It won't focus there. Will it focus there? Maybe. Oh yeah, nice. So we're also going to be replacing the bottom string with a 74. So we're going to be going 74 on the bottom, then 46, 34, 20, 16 and 12. That's the tuning. In terms of the neck tension at the moment, there's a little bit of a bow in it. However, the strings that are on it are a little lighter than the ones that we're going to be putting on it. So maybe that extra tension we're putting on will counteract that, but we'll leave that for the time being. Same with the intonation. If you watched any of my videos before, I always like to do the intonation before I take the strings off, just to kind of get a ballpark of where it's at. It just means you can move things a little bit during the setup process, so when you come to it, you can kind of have a better guess at where you're going to be. However, because we're changing the strings out for a different gauge, we're going to leave the intonation for now. So truss rod looks like it might need a bit of a tighten, but we'll come to that. The neck is adjustable. Tuners are in good working order. The Hipshot black tuners, there's nothing wrong with them at all. It's just literally a cosmetic change, changing them out for the black over to the gold ones. Nut is in good working order. The frets are really, really nice. The stainless steel on these 24 frets. It's sort of polished. Like I say, it's a 2019, so it's only 4 years old. Custom little inlay here as well. The chap that owns this got a little face tattoo there, and it matches that, which is kind of cool. We've also got some Luminlay dot inlays on this as well, so they glow in the dark, which is very cool. Output jack is really wiggly, so we're going to be tightening that up, cleaning that out. Maybe replace it if it needs it, but I doubt it will. Probably just a clean and a tighten should sort that out. Pots wise, again, very wobbly, sort of moving around, quite scratchy as well. So we'll be cleaning those out. Same with the switch. And so what else have we got? Wiring is in good condition. I'll have a little look in the back. We're obviously going to be changing out the pickups, so we'll remove these, get the wires prepped, or go through that process again like I did in the last video. Screws are good, pickups are seated correctly. We don't know, we'll be changing those out, but they certainly will be when I'm done with it. Strap pins are in good working order. We've got strings allocated. So before we move any further, I'll just show you the parts that we're using. So we've got these lovely custom Bare Knuckle Silo pickups, which are the Reverb custom ones with this really cool little sort of wave effect on there. So really cool looking pickups these. They sound amazing as well. I've heard great things about them. Looking forward to hearing the difference. We've got our 6-string fixed bridge Hipshot. Zoom in on that. Yeah, look at that. Haven't actually opened this yet. So that's the gold one. We're going to replace, and I mean, this is, you know, this is top end gear we're doing here. No sort of cheap and cheerful parts here. We're going full hog. And then we've got like for like Hipshot gold tuners. Very nice. So let's go over tools then. We're going to be using my normal Crescent, really nice pneumatic snips, really high quality, really firm and really grip on there. We've got a couple of nut drivers in different sizes for the machine heads and the output jack and the pots. I've got a new, very exciting little gadget here. This is a StewMac digital nut gauge. So if you are wanting to file out the nut slots and lower them, this is a really super accurate way of determining A, how much you need to take it down, and B, how much you've actually taken it down afterwards. Usually you do this by eyeball and just kind of tapping around. I still do a bit of that, but this is a nice way of knowing, kind of giving you a rough idea of where that nut slot needs to sit. So looking forward to getting stuck into using that. Got my little StewMac Guitar Tech kit. Really recommend these for any guitar players out there. It's got every single size, all your metrics, all your imperials, you with the little bits and pieces in there as well. We've got our couple of decent screwdrivers, my Lindstrom needle nose, Lindstrom snips, Waverley string winder, and we are going to be using today, so this is a 25.4 inch scale. Music Nomad don't make a fret shield in this size. However, they do make a 25.34 in them, which is actually the Martin one, the Martin acoustic one. So I've kind of had a little eyeball up with this, and I think we will get away for using this all the way up until the 21st fret, and then we'll just masking tape off those separately. So that's it for tools. First things first, we are going to remove the machine head. So let's get these strings off, and we'll just go ahead and start taking the machine heads off. Just going to cut these strings. Okay, so before we look to loosen the nuts off from the front, we're just going to take the ones off at the back first. Always handy to have a little box for all your parts. This is my little Bosk one that came with some soap in it. Shout out Tom Begley. So hopefully, if we're lucky, from what I understand, these new Hipshot ones are a direct replacement. So hopefully all the screw holes match up and stuff, but you never know. Might have to jiggle around. I kind of like having a bit of mystery in these videos as well, do you know what I mean? I've had a quick look at the parts, but it's also nice to, if we discover something needs doing or something I didn't sort of plan on having to do, it's nice to sort of discover that together. These off, so 10mm then. Always a good idea when you're taking these off as well, just to keep the nut and the washer with the machine head. So we'll just give the headstock a little bit of a clean. We'll just remove the truss rod cover. Actually, we'll just clean the cover first, and then just a little tiny bit there. So we just remove the truss rod cover in case we need to play around with it later. Always just kind of like to eyeball it as well and just see what kind of condition it's in. Again, with a 4-year-old guitar, I don't know if you've used Mayones or played Mayones before, but the quality of them is absolutely outstanding. They're very good guitar, especially this one. It's a custom shop. He's had some customizations done to it. Bit of a clean on the back then. What we got then? Oh, and they line up perfectly. Bobby Dazzler. In terms of changing machine heads out, this is about as easy as it gets. We're just putting like for like straight on it, which is really nice. No extra drilling required. Now we're just kind of loosely tightening these up. You don't want to tighten them up too much until we've got all the parts in situ. If you screw the screw in too tight, it might stop it from moving where you want it to later on when we're securing the nut and the washer at the front on. You want to just kind of leave everything a little bit loose until you've got all the parts where you need them. Make sure, you know, just eyeball it, make sure everything's where you need it to be, and then do the final tighten up afterwards. You'll save yourself a lot of time. Oh, that's quite sexy, isn't it? Let's pop some gloves on. Okay. As I said before, we're just going to sort of finger tighten these. The shaft size on all of these are exactly the same. On some machine heads, you'll get the actual post, the bit that sticks up out of that you put string through. Sometimes they can be different heights, especially on Fenders. They'll tend to be sort of lower down on the thinner strings and higher up on the thicker strings. So we're happy with the position of these then, and we're just going to do the final little tighten up. You don't want to tighten these up too much because you can crack the paint. So what we're going to move on to next, I reckon we'll get this bridge removed, because I think that's probably going to be the second sort of quickest thing that we can do on this. So I'm just going to back all these saddles off. And I'm just going to back all these off to the point where, in fact, you know what, we'll just remove all of them. Okie dokies. We'll just remove the Hipshot bridge then. It's a nice little touch on this as well, on the bridge there. It's ever so slightly countersunk, looks like it's countersunk by about 1 millimeter. So it's just enough just to sort of keep it in there and stop it from rattling around. Nice little detail. Let's get our new bridge out. Very nice. Silver screws. It's a bit naff, isn't it? Gold hardware with silver screws. I guess the grub screws and the screws in there are silver, but gently pull out this little bit of paper that's in there. Okay, so that's good, it's like for like. So I'm just gonna bring these screws all the way to the point where they're almost coming out. And we're gonna get our new screws in. I'm just gonna place them just halfway in at the moment. Now, as a general rule, if you've got a piece of hardware that's got 3 screws on it, one at either end and one in the middle, generally I'll put the one in the middle in first. So you've got that sort of really tight, sort of secure center point. Beautiful. And because we're putting a thicker string on, a really thick string, 74, I'm going to pull this all the way back because I've just got a feeling that we're going to need that much on there. And then for the rest of them, I'm just going to sort of eyeball them roughly where I want them. And then when it comes to actually setting the radius and setting the action and stuff like that, we'll fine tune it. But for now, I'm just getting these in a ballpark. Do this by hand. Generally, I avoid using any sort of electric tools if I can, drills and drill drivers and stuff like that, because you're always going to run the risk of kind of over tightening stuff and threading stuff. And generally, when you're working with your hands and just with sort of normal hand tools, you get a much sort of clearer response from the tool, and you know, you're a lot less likely to thread it basically. So that's it for now. I'm going to leave them there. Setting these up is kind of a two-part process really. One is kind of getting the hardware installed and make sure it's sort of lined up all right and everything. And then the second stage is popping all the strings on, getting your radius right, getting your action right, and setting your intonation. So, but they're all things we are going to do later on. The next best thing to do is going to be to change out these pickups, I reckon. So we'll just have a tidy up again. Right then, so let's get started with removing these knobs. Now, these are split shaft pots. I can see there that they've put a little piece of wood in the middle that just kind of stops it from bending. All these little rubber washers on there as well, which is a nice little detail. But for now I'm just going to take those off. Just finger tighten them. And then we'll just get a little tighten from the top. Now it's really, you've got to be really careful when you're doing this with pots. If you start to twist it and it feels quite loose still and it feels like it's moving, stop, open up the back, hold it from the bottom and do it that way. Otherwise you're going to rip loads of wires out. But I'm just going to kind of finger tighten these, well, very loosely with that part. I'm just going to take the switch off there. We're just going to check that the switch is nice and tight where it is, which it's not. So that was a good job we did that. You also got to be careful with these, the switches. Sometimes they will ground themselves to the inside of the cavity and the back of the guitar. So if these get loose, you can actually lose your ground connection and it'll start humming like crazy. So just for now, we'll do that. Let's do a bit of contact cleaner in there while we've got it all opened out. And we're just gonna do that with a switch. A bit more for good measure in either side. So let's open up the back. As we look at this then, you can see it's all lovely foiled out inside. So this is something that can, you know, can reduce the hum in the guitar. We get a good look around here. So as you can see at the moment, this output jack is wiggling around like crazy. So first thing I'm gonna do is just secure that. Make sure that's all good. Now that is lovely and tight. Just give it a quick clean out. And when it pushes in, it wants to feel nice and tight. It's clicking, it's not moving around anywhere. Cool, so that's the jack done, the switch done. Let's have a look at our pickups then. So this is going to be pretty straightforward, I reckon. We've got the green and white soldered to the bottom. Black and the ground is the ground, and the red is going to go to there. So I think what I'll do with this one then is I'm just going to do these one at a time. So we'll do the neck pickup, wire it all in, and then vice versa with the bridge pickup. So we're just going to get rid of the wires then. So that's our ground wire. That's our coil split. And that's our pickup input. That's good to go. So, and flip it over and remove the pickup screws. Okay, excellent. Got our 2 screws there. Now these pickups have already been drilled out. These holes have been drilled out so they can be mounted directly to the guitar. Okay, that's our Bare Knuckle Ragnarok out. Make sure it's going to fit the cavity, which it does, just. With these pickups, they will come with a threaded insert inside the pickup plate mount here. It's threaded so that a screw can go into it. Now that's designed to go in a pickup surround. If your guitar's like this and it doesn't have pickup surrounds, you're going to be screwing the pickup directly into the guitar. Now in here, we've got threaded inserts inside there, which is really nice. So we're going to use the screws that came out with the old pickups rather than the new ones. And then that way we can keep the nice thread mounting. However, you do need to widen the holes in the pickups to do this. We're going to widen them to 2.5 mil. That's it. Only takes a little bit. It only takes a minute, girl. Right, so not quite big enough, so we're just going to up that to 3 mil. We're actually going to need it a little bit bigger. 3.5 mil. Let's just cover up the guitar so we don't cause any unwanted damage or scratches. Okay, so that one's through. And we're just going to widen up this one. So be really careful not to scratch these as you're doing it as well. Just kind of try and keep everything out of the way. Alright, so that's good to go. And then don't forget to pop your springs back in. Wonderful. Okay, so that's our neck pickup in situ. So we are just going to twist the black and the shield together, put a little cloth underneath so we don't get any unwanted blobs of solder anywhere. Now this is wired up in configuration basically just to wire it in a 2-conductor format, so basically full humbucker. So we've got this heat shrink here over the top of the green and the white. It's going to cut that free. Start fresh. Now you want these to be quite long so they're easier to twist together. A little blobby on there. So we're going to start with the green and white coil split wire on the bottom there. Make sure it's nice and tight, and then the ground is just going to go above it. Beautiful, nice and neat and tidy. And then we've got our bridge, our pickup output wire, which is just going to go onto here. We'll neaten up the wires afterwards. Now, as I said in my last video where I changed some pickups out, I prefer to leave these pickup wires these days longer than they need to be. So just kind of leave any excess on there because, yeah, it's really neat, nice and neat to make them neat and tidy. But if you want to change anything later on, it can be really tricky if you've cut them down really short. So in my opinion, you're best off sacrificing a bit of neat and tidiness and just leaving that extra slack on, just in case you want to do something different with them in future. So we've now desoldered the bridge pickup, so we can remove that. And we're going to do exactly the same with this one as we did with the other one. So before we do anything else, we're just going to drill these holes out. Spring. No, something wrong with this. So as I'm tightening up the screw here, getting a lot of friction off the back of it. So I'm just going to investigate why that is, because if we don't fix that, I'm going to end up threading the screw. And I can see what's happened here. The springs kind of worked itself into the wood as I was screwing it down there. It was very peculiar. Okay, let's have another go then, shall we? It's really easy when things aren't quite going your way and you get really frustrated and you want to throw things at the wall. If you're finding that something's just like, why is this so hard, or why is this easier than it normally is, just take it all apart and investigate why. Because if you just keep hammering down on it with a screwdriver, chances are you're going to make it a lot worse. That is in now. The screw's moving nice and freely. So if you want to adjust that later on, we can. But bloody hell, look at that. I mean, needs a bit of a polish, but looks pretty bling, that, doesn't it? It's pretty good. We got a bit of wiring left to do. Okay, so green and white at the bottom. needle nose, just bend that into position. Okay. So we'll just do a quick tap test. Split coil. Split coil. Beautiful. Just check that the tone's all good. You can do this just with your ears. Okie dokes. So, pretty happy with that. The tone knob feels really tight though. So, I'm going to clean these out. Now these Bourne's ones typically do have a bit more resistance on them than a CTS or other manufacturers. And the chap who owns this guitar says he likes that. He likes it sort of feeling a bit more tight. Pretty happy with that. I'm going to have a clean up. Our next little job is going to be drilling out this machine head. We just need to do this to accommodate the thicker string that we're going to be popping in there. And we're just going to up this to 2.5 mil. Make sure that if it's a lock-in tuner, make sure it's out all the way at the back. Thicker string, just pop him through to make sure it's working. We might need to go up to 3 mil, depends. And that's all good, lovely. I'm just going to soften up the burrs inside there as well with a little bit of sandpaper. Okay, so finally then, in terms of all this new hardware, we're just going to pop on these new knobs. There's quite a big gap in the middle there. Let's just see if it'll fit with a brass insert. So I'm going to turn it all the way on, put this little pop sleeve over the top, and then we're just going to pop him in there. That's all lovely and tight. Going to do the same with the other one. Make sure that's on all the way. We can put the switch knob back on. Beautiful. So before we put the strings on, I'm just going to get these grub screws on the bridge saddles just kind of roughly where we want them. A lot easier to do this when the strings are off the guitar. We're not going to be setting this perfectly, we're just kind of getting a rough ballpark. And we've got a 16-inch radius on this guitar, so we're going to match the radius of the neck with the radius on the saddles, but we can't really do that until we've got the strings on the guitar. So for now, just eyeballing it roughly. Looking good as a rough starting point. And then the only other thing that we're going to need to do is do a little bit of filing on the nut just to accommodate this thicker string. Now, I like to just sort of create a guide just using the actual string. And that'll just kind of guide us where we want it. This looks like to be a graphite nut, so it's quite soft. It's quite easy to do this with. So we're going to get our 75 gauge file. Just make sure it's sitting in there nice and smoothly. So I think what we'll do now is actually get the strings fed through the bridge saddle, the bridge saddles. We'll go from there. So I've got a feeling we might need to file down the F string as well for the 46. Oh no, that actually fits in perfectly, so that's fine. Got a little bit of 800. So that's all good, that's nice and smooth. So just going to pop a little bit of lubricant in there. Good amount of lubricant in those slots. And adding this lubricant just adds it just gives you an extra little bit of smoothness through the slot, so it's not sort of like going to pull or snag on anything. It's not going to change the way the guitar sort of plays or anything like that, but it's just going to make your tuning that little bit more accurate, which is what we want. Now these frets are immaculately clean and polished, so I'm just going to give them just a quick once over with some fretboard cleaner. The stainless steel frets are sort of vastly superior to nickel frets in terms of how heavy duty they are. They'll sort of polish up similar to nickel. So as I said before, apologies if I'm repeating myself if you watch more than one of these videos. Lock-in tuners and thick strings are not friends. What you don't want to do is pull it all the way through and tighten it up, and that's it. What you want to do is pull it all the way through and then pull it back about a fret. Then you want to tie it off. I'm tightening it up, should I say. Then you want to wind it over the top. Push them down. And that's just going to allow us to stretch this string properly. If you attempt to stretch the string and you pulled it through, you're just going to snap it. And if you're not snapping it, you're not stretching them hard enough, is my opinion, of course. I'm particularly enjoying this one today because in about 2 hours time, I'm back on the ambulance. I don't know if I've mentioned it in my videos before, but I am also a fully qualified paramedic working in Sheffield. And I also love that job. It's a lovely mix of the two things. Get to work on some guitars, get to work on people's hearts and lungs and all that good stuff. It's a nice mix, but to be honest, I do prefer doing this. It's quite fun. Plus I can do it in my pyjamas if I want to. Can't really be a paramedic in your pyjamas, can you? Next up, we're going to look at the action. So we've obviously we've got a brand new bridge on here, new bridge saddles, new machine heads, everything like that. So the first thing I like to do when we've got new string gauges or anything like that, first thing that you should do is check that the neck is straight, because all the action, the intonation, radius matching, all that stuff, if you've got a guitar that has a non-straight neck or it's got a little bow in it or whatever, then you're not going to be able to set all the other stuff properly. So just going to have a look down the center using the string as a straight edge, and that is actually pretty perfect. So what we'll do is we'll have a play. So what I'll tend to do is I will get the action dialed on the thickest string, then get the action dialed on the thinnest string, and then I'll match the rest of the strings to those. So I'll kind of start from the outside and then kind of work towards the middle. Okay, we're back. So had to step away from this a little bit. Being perfectly honest, got into that situation where I was feeling a bit frustrated. So just walked away, went and walked the dog, came back, made a cup of tea. Life's good. So in that time, noticed that a couple of the nut slots on this were a little bit too low, especially on the bottom one, and we've widened it and effectively made it worse. So being really honest, I'm not going to cut any of this out. This can happen. So basically what I've done is I've filled the nut slot with some powdered graphite. This is a really cool little product from Stu Mac, just got released fairly recently. It comes in three different formats. So you've got sort of your white powdered bone, off-white powdered bone, and graphite colour. This stuff's really cool. All you need to do is basically drop a tiny little amount. It comes with this handy little scoop. A tiny little amount goes into the nut slot. You just sort of push this sort of powder exactly where you want it around the slot. Then you just drop a little bit of really, really thin super glue. Let it set and then come back, do it again. This stuff is absolutely amazing. I've never used this product before, and I've always kind of, in the past, I've had to do this sort of in a quick way when there's not time to make a new nut and, you know, get through a gig. I used to use baking powder or baking soda, powdered up, a little bit of super glue, but it always has this sort of like kind of soft texture to it, doesn't really resonate very well, and it doesn't last very long. So this stuff, the absolute master Dan Earlywine has said, I watched a little video on this, and he said that this is the greatest solution to this problem. So I invested in it. I'm really glad I did. It came for the whole kit was like $19, I think, and boy, was it worth it. So I filled the slot for this sticker string, and I've just kind of done an initial file down. I'm just going to show you the rest of the process. The reason I didn't film the filling it before was I was just kind of too frustrated, and I just needed to walk away. And you know, we don't need another guy on YouTube angry, do we? So I'm really glad with how this has come out. Such a beautiful guitar. These gold pickups are looking absolutely mega. So I'm just going to remove this tape that I put on there, just to make sure that no glue kind of spilled over the top, which it hasn't, which is nice. So I'm just going to remove this piece of tape as well, and we're going to do this together. So just mute that. We're going to tune this up to A sharp, just over the top there, nice and steady with this. How do we check that the nut is the right height? So best thing to do is just hold down a couple of frets before it and just tap there, and you want a good, just a tiny little gap there, tiny little bit of relief in that gap there. Now this is quite quite high. So I'm going to get out one of my really cool new little tools. This again is a Stu Mac product. It is a nut slot gauge. So you can see exactly, I'll tell you what, I'll do it this way around. So you can see, oh no, hang on, can't do that, but I can flip that. Flip it, yo. So you're going to push this all the way up to the back of the slot, kind of put it there, and then there's this little gauge in the side of it. I don't know if you can see there on here. And then basically what you want to do is zero it off. So, sorry about that noise. Let's go back. So I'm going to zero it. And then what I like to do is just push the string down roughly to sort of where you think it should be sitting. And that there is about 0.1. So we're going to take the gauge off, leave it powered on, so it's still sort of calibrated to the right size. And then we're going to file this down 0.1 of a millimeter. Up to tune. We'll drop the gauge back on. And that's come down about 0.12. So that's all it takes. Just a couple of runs with the file is enough to sort of take 0.1 of a millimeter off, and you kind of want to do this in 0.1 increments. Now that still feels quite high, so just going to do it again. But you really want to take your time with this. So we're taking about 0.4 of a millimeter. Obviously, without a gauge like this, it's quite sort of hard to know exactly what you've done. You don't necessarily need one of these, but if you're doing this all the time, it's a really, really handy little thing to get, and it's already kind of paid for itself, really. So, as has the nut powder. We're going to continue with setting this up. Now, earlier when I was popping the strings on, I mentioned that these new machine heads feel really loose. They will tend to, out the box. The screws will be quite loose, so Just going to tighten these up to a good level. Now you don't want to tighten these too much that there's like a little rubber washer inside the machine head, and you don't want to tighten it to the point that the rubber washer starts to bend or move. Before we continue with this, actually, just going to sand down this nut slot just a touch. Nothing too crazy, just literally just going to run a bit of 400, bit of 600, bit of 800, bit of 1200. Into playing position. First thing we're going to look at now then is the action. I'll tell you what, ladies and gents, doing these videos is a lot of bloody work. Bloody batteries and SIM cards and phones, and you know, I got myself into it, but I hope you appreciate it because it's fucking hard work. So when I'm setting up the action, first thing I'm going to do is the bottom strings, i.e. the closest string to you, miscommonly called the top string, but it's actually the bottom. Or certainly that's what Dan Earlywine calls it, so that's what I call it. Wicked. So that's not buzzing at all, so I think we can drop it just a tad more. The action looks great. Sort of as low as we can get it on that bottom string. Obviously it's a 74, it's basically a bass string, so you're just going to need to make sure it's kind of as low as you can get it without buzzing. As we're just dialing in the action right now and the radius, so what I mean by action is obviously the gap between the string and the top of the fret. So that gap there, that's your action. The radius is the shape that it follows. So the radius of the fretboard, you want to make sure the saddles are following that same radius. Now, a note sort of on the side of this, with a thicker string like this, the radius is going to be slightly flatter at this end, because in order to get that thick string where you want it, if you put it too far low down, i.e. right at the bottom of where the radius should be, you're going to find that it probably starts to buzz. So it's just kind of, we do want a perfect 16-inch radius on this, but just bear in mind that when you've got putting a really thick string on the bottom, that one's going to need to be just a little higher than it is. So you don't need a radius gauge to do this, although it does help. So that F just needs to come up a touch. And what we're looking for here is just a nice steady curve on the saddles. So the bottom one's going to be lowest, then it's going to kind of go up, and then in the middle is the highest point. Generally the what would be the D and the G string are kind of going to be at the same height, and then you're going to have these two lower and these two lower, if that makes sense. And like I say, you don't necessarily need a radius gauge to do this. You can just kind of play around, and if you've got the time to sort of sit there and make it perfect, do that, because using a radius gauge just sort of gets you in a good, well, it gets you in exactly where you need to be, but sometimes you might just want to, you might prefer it a little higher, a little lower in certain places. There's no perfect, there's no right or wrong, it's just perfectly, wrong word, it's what works for you, not necessarily what works for me is going to work for someone else. So when I initially meet a guitar player and I bring the guitar in, I want to kind of get a sense of the kind of music that they play, what kind of picks they use, how sort of aggressive they are, if they play really hard, if they play really light, and I'll set up the guitar with that in mind, you know, with various different ways of setting things up. So intonation then, how good do these pickups sound? Perfect. Little flat, so we're going to shorten the string. little sharp, so we need to make the string longer. So we're going to tighten the screw and pull the saddle this way. It's going to go sharp, so we need to turn it down. Just going to stretch the strings in, so don't always show this how I do this in the video. 4 fingers like that, your thumbs. You're going to push the string that way with your thumbs, and you're going to push the string backwards with your fingers. So you're going to get the string like that, and like that, and like that, and that's it. Stretch. So I'll do this on all the strings, get it into final playing position again, do a final tune up, and then this is ready to gig, or, you know, sit in a bedroom, rock out, do whatever you want to do. So in summary, this has been a 2019 Mayones Duvell Elite custom shop. We have put some brand new gold silo pickups in. These are the Reverb Massad custom set with this custom plate on. Looks super cool. Master volume, master tone, got new knobs on there. We've cleaned and tightened up all the electronics. Obviously we've wired these in. We've got this brand new Hipshot gold bridge, the brand new gold Hipshot machine heads. Goes without saying, there's a lot of money on the bench here. This is, you know, this isn't a cheap endeavor, but if you are into your heavy metal, you like your thick strings, then this is definitely one of the best guitars out there. Thanks for checking out. If you've enjoyed the video, like and subscribe. Loads more content coming soon. Thanks for joining me. Have a great weekend. Nice one.